Welcome everyone to this live stream from the Youth Action Week. I hope those joining us online can hear and see us. My name is Bálint Molnár. I work at the European Youth Centre in Budapest, and I'm part of the Council of Europe's Youth Department. And this is a live stream organized in partnership with the Council of the EU Council Youth Partnership, the Council of Europe's Youth Department, and the Young European Ambassadors Network. I would like to briefly introduce our panelists today. So from my left here in the European Youth Centre Strasbourg is Liliia Hudziuk from Ukraine, Freya Proudman from the UK, Magalashvili from Georgia, Alice Bergholtz from the Advisory Council on Youth, and last but not least, Marietta Balázs, representing the EU Council of Europe Youth Partnership. So without further ado, I would like to start the discussion focusing on youth participation, youth political participation, and would like to pass the floor now to Marietta to introduce briefly the work of the EU Council of Europe Youth Partnership on youth political participation.
Hello everyone, my name is Marietta Balázs and I'm a project officer at the EU Council of Europe Youth Partnership. The Youth Partnership itself was created to foster synergies between the priorities and programs of the partner institutions, the Council of Europe and the European Commission in the field of youth. Next year we are going to celebrate our 25th anniversary. And we offer a platform of cooperation for the European Union and the Council of Europe. And we also function as a think tank. We generate knowledge, collect knowledge, and translate it for the effective use in the youth sector to different platforms, to podcasts, illustrations, studies, and so on. And meaningful political participation has been on the agenda of the Youth Partnership for several years now. We have started our work in detail in 2019 in the symposium organized on this topic, which resulted then in the study on political participation of young people in 2020-2021, and also a reference manual for youth policy for a European perspective. And in 2022 and 2023, we are continuing focusing on this topic, but through specific perspectives, for example, social inclusion, gender and intersectionality, and also youth participation in the context of digitalization.
Thank you very much, Marietta. Can I ask that everyone who has a microphone in front of you, you turn it on when you speak and you turn it off when you're stopped, so that we can follow this live stream seamlessly, also visually. So now I'll turn to Alice, the Vice Chair of the Advisory Council on Youth. And my question would be, Alice, to also introduce a bit what the Advisory Council is, and then what it focuses on when we speak of youth political participation.
Yes, thank you. Hi, I'm really happy to be here and to meet all of you in the panel. The Advisory Council is an advisory body within the Council of Europe, and we consist of 30 young people, and our task is to represent the youth of Europe within this institution. And this task is big and great and challenging, but it's also diverse and developing and a very important structure within the Council. What I think is unique for the Advisory Council is that we are given the equal mandate and say as the government representatives that we work with. So every decision that we make is built on consensus. That means that we need to manage the entire development of the youth sector in the Council of Europe together. It's called the co-management system. It's something we're very proud of. The Advisory Council does a lot on youth participation. It's one of our core pillars in our work. And of course, one of the main things that we are contributing with for this year is this very campaign, the Democracy Here and Democracy Now campaign that we're currently meeting for the Action Week of. But the AC is also working on issues like shrinking space. We're looking at new forms of participation. Climate is a really big topic right now within the youth movement. And it's something that is not yet that well investigated in the Council of Europe, how young people participate in environmental rights, for example. And yeah, I think we are as diverse as the youth of Europe, or at least we're trying to be. I think I'll stop there. I can speak forever, you know.
Thank you, Elisa. I think we'll have a chance to explore those topics a bit more in depth. But now I'd like to turn to Freya. Freya Proudman is a member of the Young European Ambassadors Network. So Freya, if you could give us a bit of background on the network itself. You know, who are the members? Why was it established? And what is the focus of your activities? And also perhaps, you know, your experience so far here at the Youth Action Week.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. So the EU Young European Ambassadors Program falls under the EU Neighbourhood Policy, specifically EU Neighbours East, which concerns the 6 Eastern Partnership countries, or we call them EAP countries for short, which is Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, Belarus, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. So the Young European Ambassadors Network was founded in 2016, and we have over 500 active Young European Ambassadors representing 34 different nationalities. We are divided into 7 chapters. So we have a EU-UK chapter for Young European Ambassadors, and then we have Young European Ambassadors in each of the 6 EAP countries. And what we really try to do is build connections and friendships among youth from the EU and UK and youth from the EAP. We talk about collaboration between the EU and the EAP and showcase tangible results of that collaboration, as well as focus on empowering young people, increasing civic activism and awareness as well. And we really learn from each other. We share best practices. Our organization does a lot to foster the political participation of young people through many different ways, including providing structural and organizational support for young people in order to implement their ideas, which is a really important thing for young people to have the know-how and have the resources to bring their ideas to life. And that's something our organization provides, as well as space physically and virtually for us to be able to get together, such as through conferences like this. And most importantly, they amplify their voices. Youth is really at the core of what we do. You can see that reflected across our campaigns and our social media. And we're really, really excited to be here today to talk about it. And I'm excited to be here in Strasbourg with 15 other Young European Ambassadors, especially Liliia from Ukraine and Dea from Georgia. And we're just having a great time at the Youth Action Week. Democracy is under threat in Europe and across the world. And we've got some things that we absolutely need to work on together. And it's a phenomenal opportunity to really share ideas and to collaborate.
Thank you for that very concise and yet comprehensive introduction, Freya. And indeed, you have 2 members of the Young European Ambassadors Network, Liliia and Dea. So maybe I turn to Liliia first, and to give us a bit of background of yourself. You know, where you're from. You're from Ukraine, but you know, inside Ukraine, and perhaps a bit of sort of reflection on the state of youth participation, youth political participation in Ukraine, and perhaps, you know, reflect on, you know, the period before the current conflict, the war, and what are the main challenges right now for young people in the Ukraine, clearly beyond just the challenge of the war. So the floor is yours, Liliia.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here today as a representative of Ukraine and as a Young European Ambassador from Ukraine. And yes, I come from Ukraine, and I'm currently studying in Germany, but I originally come from Zhytomyr region, and then I moved to Kyiv in order to study there. So I studied political science with a focus on German and European studies. And throughout my students' years in Ukraine, I have always been very active in different initiatives, also in different political initiatives. And my conclusion is that the youth in Ukraine is very, very active and is underrated. So for example, in Ukraine, we have miscellaneous initiatives. And what is is very unique about the youth participation in Ukraine is that we have a lot of Euro clubs. Currently, we have over 350 Euro clubs all over Ukraine. And the main idea behind these Euro clubs is to educate young people about the core EU values, about human rights. Also, people can just come together and socialize, learn languages, and share experiences, which I think is very, very valuable, especially as Ukraine has aspirations to join the European Union. Also, we have, in terms of political participation of the youth, we have different branches of youth branches of political parties. And I think it is very, very valuable for us because we still do not have a well-established party system in Ukraine. It is important to give the youth more opportunities to be actively engaged in different political initiatives. And of course, the life of the youth in Ukraine has changed because of Russia's war. But at the same time, all these initiatives, they haven't suspended their work. I would say that they even intensified their work. They carry out a lot of activities online, and they also try to make an impact on the life in their communities. They organize different voluntary initiatives in order to improve the lives in their communities. And we know that there is a lot of work. And I think that it's very, very inspiring for us. And I think that it's definitely worth mentioning, and Ukraine needs support. And in terms of young European ambassador in Ukraine, we are also actively engaged in different educational projects. And we want to show that Europe is diverse, but it is our strengths and we are stronger together. Thank you.
Thank you, Liliia. And last but not least, Dea, you're from Georgia. So, I'm very curious to hear about how young people in Georgia want to participate politically. How can they participate politically? And you yourself, as a young European ambassador, what do you feel is your role in helping and facilitating that political participation?
First of all, thank you so much for inviting us here, the Young European Ambassadors. So I'm so happy to see you, especially Liliia, because you're from Ukraine and I'm from Georgia at this point. And as Georgian, I can go through without mentioning that the heartache of the war is near to me, to all the Georgian people. Now, as Ukraine needs more help than ever, continued involvement is necessary to ensure democracy, to only gain strength, and they're not alone, and we stand with you. I want to say this. So about the understanding of the democracy, about youth political participation in Georgia, it's really important, it's really popular. Maybe you have seen the news from Georgia, because we're like young generation, we're actively involved in any type of activities which is good for our country development, for us, for the next young generation. We're trying always to develop ourselves and find new solutions to have to help people and also the government for the development. So I wanted to say about a little bit introduction of the democracy, and I will continue with the problems in Georgia, and especially political participation of the young generations. The understanding of the current democracy is really important for us in Georgia. Youth participant activity involves young people in decision making, like different types of decision making, the climate change, maybe it should be our economical stuff, or maybe some decisions to be shown clearly to the European Union and to the whole world. For example, we had some protests and we were going outside to stand with the Ukraine, with the Georgian and Ukrainian flags together. And this is important that in Georgia, young people politician participation have many diverse forms. For example, like voting, being members of the young members of the parties. I'm really proud of it, to say truth, because we have some political parties who have a like young generation speakers, youth speakers, if it will be the correct way to spell it at this point. And we're taking also the online political activism, boycotts, protest movements, and etc. Yes, and also I have some statistics, maybe if it won't be a problem to like show you. For example, like I can tell you my opinion, what I'm doing as the ambassador, and then I can continue the official statistics about the Georgian national youth policy. And actually you can see the percentage of the young generation who are involved in the different types of activities. So first of all, as young European ambassadors from Georgia and my colleagues from Georgia YAs were involved in different types of activities. For example, Liliia said about the Euroclub. I'm so happy to hear it from you, because in Georgia we have an Euroclub in Qareli, Kakheti region. The Kakheti is really popular with the wine actually, and we have so many activities there. For me as the YA, I'm more concerned about the education, because also I'm the lecturer in the State University, and it's really important as they use to continue this development for the next generation. And also I'm concerned about climate changes and environment stuff, and I'm based in Todoreti area. It's near the city, like a little village. Me and my parents and my little brother decided to move in the village and have some activities there as the YA to help the people, the community who are living there to know more about European Union and the YAs and about the Eastern Partnership. So most of the time we're concerned about that kind of the issues. So let me tell you that about the Georgian National Youth Policy concept, which was established like a previous year in 2021. It's really important because 2/3 of the young people assess the level of their peer political activism quite positive, because like young people who think that their peers are not so much or not all engaged in political process in the country is more than 28% in total, mostly explain such positivity by little interest in politics, like the 41%, and the concerns over other issues, maybe it should be like a work and education, it's like a 29% in our country. And the large number of the people, young generation, 67% of the young generation, they're involved in political parties, to be like part of it, to have an activism outside, and to like have a big participation in the decision making. Also, when I'm discussing what they do and what we're doing in our country, it's important that most of the time we're like concerned about the political things, because like it's my profession and I'm in that area with my friends, and we're always concerned to help the people and our country for the future plans, for the development, and etc. So thank you.
Thank you, Dea. I would like to take up on that a little bit, some encouraging numbers about youth participation. And in general, you know, even the research of the Youth Partnership shows that young people's interest in politics is not decreasing. It's actually growing. So Alice, I want to ask you, as a representative of the Advisory Council, as the body in the Council of Europe co-management system that is really consistently putting, and its role is to put young people's interests and issues on the table in the co-management system. Why are we talking about youth participation? Why is it a problem if young people, according to the numbers, seem to be participating just fine? Is it just a bit more complex, this question of youth participation, than just the sheer numbers that we hear?
I like the way you asked that question. No, but you know, I think this is a really interesting shift that we're going through right now in the democratic systems that we have in Europe. So young people are more engaged in politics now than ever before, but at the same time, there's a huge divide between young people and the decision-making bodies and institutions that run our systems, basically. So what we can see in many different countries, not just Sweden, where I'm from, it's really evident, but I think there are also a lot of patterns going through other European countries and regions, that young people decide to participate in different forms than what basically is recognized. So if you look at sites for statistics, or if you look at the definition of how participation is formed, that is used in many of the governments that run our countries, they look at the forms of participation that is chosen. So for example, it could be electoral participation, it could be protest movements, it could be online participation, that sort of thing. What is more and more recently developed within, for example, academia and some of the studies that have been done on youth movements in specific, is looking at, instead of the act, look at the intention. Why do the people who participate, in a sense, do it? So to give an example, I can decide not to go and vote in an election, and it could either be a political protest of mine, not to vote, not to participate and recognize the voting system, or I just don't care and I don't vote, because why would I? I'm not politically active. The challenge here is that when we're just looking at how people act, we miss this important aspect of why are they doing what they're doing. And I think this is the core issue within youth participation, because we also need to remember that young people don't have equal say as older citizens to be able to participate. Many don't have the voting age, for example, in yet. They don't have forums or opportunities to participate and voice their opinions and concerns because they have school when decisions are being taken or meetings are being held. There are many different structures that are set up in our democratic movements they're based on the idea that decision makers are adults. And this is also a main challenge in the youth field, and something that the Advisory Council is working really hard on, is to understand that it's one thing to say that we want youth participation. It's something we've been working on forever and we're really good at it. And it's another thing to actually put in the resources and investments to make changes necessary so that young people can participate in meaningful ways. I think one thing that I really just want to touch upon also is this shift that is between the collective action and the connected action. It's a terminology that was brought up about 10 years ago already, but it's something that is more and more relevant for today. So look at social movements way back in the days before internet, that type of era. Everything was clustered on the collective. We would, have memberships in organizations. We would join parties. We would maybe, go to clubs, or it could be church or families, that type of gathering. What has happened more and more in this digital era is that we are more going through networks. We're connecting with people instead of going to the collective. So with this new age, you're not that reliant on your geographical location to find others who are equally interested as you in different topics or have similar ambitions. You can connect with people all over the world instead. And this is also a huge shift that we can definitely see, especially amongst young people, because we now have generations who are growing up with internet, in a sense that, I'm 27 and I remember actually going online. It was an act. You needed to go to a certain room to connect, I think my generation is the last one that can tell that story. Then of course, looking at the advancements of digitalization, it's both a blessing and a curse. We have the opportunity here to make democracy more inclusive than ever. We can reach more people than we've ever had before. That this event is live streamed. It's an amazing example of being able to go outside of the building that we're sitting in and join the public out there and see who's listening. So this is all connected in a sense, but as you say, it's so complicated. There are so many different dimensions to it. But what we can do, for example, in the Advisory Council, is to launch campaigns like this one, to make sure that we can meet and to discuss jointly on how we want democracy to develop and improve in Europe and in our home countries.
Thanks for that, Alice. And I would like to pick up on one thing that you said is about this networked activism or network participation, and then sort of link it to the Young European Ambassadors Network. And Freya, if you could sort of shed a bit of light on your experience in this network as someone, I assume, active in your own locale, in your own country politically, and then how come you have joined this network, and what is your experience being in this network of, I assume, sharing um, experiences with people who come from a very different political environments and maybe facing very different challenges. What's the connecting thread? What are some experiences similar? Do you kind of recognize some experiences as shared in this network?
Absolutely. I think what really unites us is this idea that it's inclusive. It's our shared future together, and we must build it together. And what I've noticed is really uniting people is this eagerness, this urgency that we must act now. And to be honest with you, I'm politically active because I'm scared. I'm scared for the future. The threats to democracy that we're seeing, discrimination, the erosion of our human rights. I grew up in the US, and we've recently lost our right to abortion, shrinking civil space, the war in Ukraine, the climate change, the list goes on, and I'm scared. But what gives me hope is really this Young European Ambassadors Network. It's coming to conferences in Strasbourg like this because we are all fighting for a better future, but you're not alone because we are fighting together. And we are utilizing the strengths of one another, the skill sets, the networks, the connections that we all have in order to make change for us all. And one of the reasons I really got involved with the Young European Ambassadors Network is because I believe in many policies, there's a lot of misunderstanding about Eastern Partnership countries and a lot of bias and stigma, which is unacceptable. And I really wanted to be part of that because it's so important to learn more, to learn about others, learn about the experiences that we have, because like I said, it's our collective future and the decisions that we make impact all of us, and their voices must be represented. In the Young European Ambassadors in our EU network that I come from, it's amazing that we have all these activities that were divided based on our different interests, and we have different working groups based on arts and culture, the environment, dialogue initiatives, which I actually work on with Liliia. So I oversee the dialogue initiative between EU youth and Ukrainian youth, and we do activities like Ukrainian art nights and all sorts of activities like this, which is really, really powerful way to understand one another and to come together. And I think that's really important because it's communication as well. We're largely a communication project. We have a podcast, which I would recommend everybody checks out. So it's a podcast called European at Heart, and we're actually doing episodes right now about solidarity. So I recently recorded an episode with some young European ambassadors from Georgia about what Georgia is doing to show solidarity with Ukraine. And we also have our magazine as well, which was published in cooperation with the Youth Action Week and the Democracy Here Now campaign, which we encourage young people to write about the issues that they face in their countries and to propose solutions to them. So many different channels that we can be part of together.
Thanks, Freya. That's quite wonderful. And you know, in the next round, I would like to return a little bit to Dea and Liliia also to share your experiences. But first, maybe I want to go back to Marietta and a little bit of sort of the bird's eye view on youth political participation from the perspective of the partnership, which is that you guys have been doing a lot of research and a lot of sort of analysis sort of to really highlight and map out the different forms and structures of youth participation. If you could share a little bit of the results of the latest research and also maybe some references of where this can be found. So those who are interested to take a deep dive into youth political participation, where can they find the resources of the Youth Partnership, which are quite plentiful?
Yes, indeed, the Youth Partnership has many materials connected to this topic. And what we can say in general is young people, meaningful political participation is crucial for a healthy democracy. Also, as Bálint already mentioned, our research shows that most of the young people, over 70%, participate. Therefore, we can say that the participation in politics is not decreasing, but it's growing, it's just different. It's issue-led, for example, connected to climate. It is shorter term and less organized, but at the same time, very quickly evolving. We can say there are a few factors which influence youth political participation, most of it which was already mentioned here. For example, the need of young people to be seen, to not to be invisible, to have equal treatment in certain processes. Also socioeconomic factors such as income and education. And I would like to highlight also the question of gender. We have a video which will be linked with all resources in the comments, which talks about young women participation in politics at the moment in Europe. And we can say that it's very hard at the moment for young girls also to see themselves in politics, because if we look at our own national governments, most of the politicians are male and over 50. Therefore, we need new role models, and we need encouragement to our young women to participate in politics. Also, there are some other contextual limitations to the democratic environment. For example, financial obstacles. Many times youth organizations receive short-term funding, not structural grants. Therefore, they cannot ensure that their programs are continuous. Also, legal limitations on youth organizations and the criminalization of youth activism is a very big withdrawal for participation, and also limiting the rights of certain young people in politics, especially minority groups or LGBTQI youth, and shrinking their youth spaces, whether it's physical, virtual, or hybrid. And also, even though if in some cases there are spaces for young people to participate, we can say that these spaces are very much, first of all, gendered, then also limited or reserved for certain groups of people. And also the young people's right to assembly is under threat all over Europe. And this has been shown from our research and also from the research of the European Youth Forum. And yes, overall, what we can say is that at the moment we shifted to unconventional types of participation. Conventional types are usually voting, participating in a party, or signing petitions or running for office. But at the moment, young people prefer what we call a do-it-ourselves politics on topics such as climate change, gender equality, racial justice, or student rights. And then the forms in which they participate is now petitions, social movements, boycotts and boycotts, marches, demonstrations, if we just think about the Climates for Future movement, or disruptive actions and refusal to cooperate with authorities, flash mob, or occupation of public property, which has happened many times in different countries during the pandemic. And as I said earlier, we have many different materials on this topic, and you will be able to find everything in the comments section. And I would like to especially highlight the study on youth political participation and the illustrations which were made together with the study, which are very easy checklist on how you can identify meaningful youth participation. And also, if you are a policy maker or a decision maker, how you can involve young people and what are the requirements for meaningful youth political participation.
Thanks, Marietta. And just a reminder to those who are interested in finding out more, then I suggest the EU Council of Europe Youth Partnership Facebook page, website, Instagram feed, YouTube channel. So all the social media channels, you can find a vast amount of very, very useful resources on youth political participation and many other topics that the partnership is researching and publishing on. Again, sort of picking up a note from your contribution, Marietta, about young women serving as role models and being active in politics. So Liliia and Dea, you're both young women in countries that I presume where the political culture is not dominated by women. So either of you can start. I would like to hear a bit more, then start with Liliia, a bit more about your experiences as someone who's female, who's active in politics. How does it work in the Ukraine? What is your experience, both positive and negative, I suppose?
So luckily, my experiences were mostly very positive. And in the framework of our EU Neighbours in East initiative, we actually deal a lot with such issues. We try to debunk some common stereotypes that exist in our society. So Young European Ambassadors Project initiative is a communication project in the first place. And the core aspect of our activities is to educate young people about human rights, about the core values of the European Union, and also about the cooperation between the European Union and Ukraine. And one positive aspect of our activities is that we can come up with different initiatives and we can implement our own projects. And in this way, we can also pick up some leadership skills. We can also learn how to overtake responsibility and to how to be politically and socially active in the future. Honestly, I used to be very, very insecure about my desire to be politically active. But when I joined the Young European Ambassador initiative, I became so much empowered by so many women and young girls that are actively participating in politics, in different other initiatives. And I think that this empowerment that the Young European Ambassadors Initiative has given me has impacted my life in a very meaningful way. And that is why I think that it is very important especially for our culture. Our culture is a bit more conservative, and to implement such projects and to put across the message that human rights should be at the core of all the initiatives that are implemented at national or local levels, and that women can also participate in different initiatives, and that they can also make an impact. And in fact, today we also have a lot of women in Ukraine who are actively engaged in different political initiatives, who are fighting at the forefront in Eastern Ukraine. So we shouldn't underestimate this fact. And I think that it is something that is definitely worth admiring. And I think that there is also this stereotype that our culture is mostly man-dominated, but I think that today we can see that it doesn't really hold true, and that that today Ukraine is at war. And we have seen that women are also actively participating in different ways, not only in political ways, but also they are taking leadership when it comes to different voluntary initiatives. And I think that it's also a very meaningful form of participation, especially now. Thank you.
Thank you. And so pretty much the same question to you, Dea, and your experiences, your personal experiences as a young woman being politically active. And maybe I just add another question for you to reflect on. What do you think are the 2-3 biggest obstacles today in Georgia, and maybe as you see elsewhere, to young people's political participation?
Thank you so much. It's a great question to hear him here, because I'm engaged in the political ways, especially in diplomacy, because I'm concerned about becoming more likely to be a diplomat. But on the way of this, I can say that as the women, I had the right to work everywhere I wanted. Besides that, there's a difference between men and women salaries, but actually the positions and the areas where you want to work, it's open for the women. For example, I always tell to my friends, to my colleagues, like, I'm a great example, you can use it. I was always starting from the internship, then applying for the vacancies, and then started to working. So nothing stopped me that I'm a woman, that I can't work there. Actually, I was working in the Parliament of Georgia as an invited specialist of international relations. I was working in Ministry of Foreign Affairs just for 6 months. I was working also in the Embassy of the Republic of Bulgaria as the executive assistant of the ambassador, and it was really great chance for me, actually. And right now, as the woman, I am engaged in the YA's activities, and I'm so happy to be part of this amazing Eastern Partnership initiative, because I have met so many amazing colleagues there, not only women, but men also, because they're doing the great job. And also, I'm really happy to hear the question, because in Georgia in 2015 have changed some things about the women's rights, for example. I wanted, I have Googled it to know the exact percentage and the year when it was established. For example, by the Parliamentary Human Rights Committee was approved with the 6 votes in favor of a legislative proposal on gender quotas prepared by the Women's Politician Participation Working Group. It means that every second person in a parliament is a woman. So out of that, that's 550 deputies. We have 38 women in the parliament right now, and they're really active, actually, and they're really amazing to say. Actually, it's kind of changing the situation right now on a positive side, but we have so many steps to go through and so many things to do for the women right now, for the more development, for more engagement in the state. Organizations, and they could even talk freely in the future. And I hope so the young generation will change it soon, and we will work on it together.
Thank you. Turning back to you, Alice, this Youth Action Week that is taking place in Strasbourg this week, with over 400 young people coming from dozens of member states of the Council of Europe and beyond, to discuss meaningful youth participation, the revitalization of democracy, digitalization, peace and security. The aim of this Youth Action Week is to develop a list of points, action points, as a proposal for member states and decision makers. So sort of midway through this week, what is your feeling? How are these points coming along? And perhaps if you can sort of give us a sneak peek from where you sit, what could be the most salient points about youth political participation that decision makers should listen to and should take to heart?
Yeah, so my main thoughts so far in this week is that I'm absolutely amazed. This is way cooler than I thought it would or ever dreamed that it could be. I think the main thing that really strikes me here, it's something that I knew, but I'm constantly surprised every time that young people are showing up when we create spaces to discuss how democracy can develop. And young people show up in such diversity that it's clear that there is nothing that unites us but our age, really. So we have, for example, 21 parallel workshops going on different topics on democracy, digitalization, and youth participation. And that shows just the variety of themes that can be discussed within this campaign. And we're only discussing youth. This is the only age group that is being relevant at this discussion. So that is definitely something that strikes me, that these issues are so complex and so big. So what unites them, that I think is important for us to set a focus on now for the rest of the week, is to see these patterns that consist in all of the different workshops and the thematics, because we come here for different reasons. Some people want to discuss AI, other people want to discuss youth, peace and security. We have a lot of people who are very involved in these more network forms of participation, others from these old institutional organizations who have been around for decades. So I think that is the challenge that we all face, that we need to find a consensus on here together, because the results of this action week, it's something that will be the basis of a continuing push for stronger and better meaningful youth participation. This is not closing a week with a list of what the people of the week thought and then we're done with it, and it's a report that we put in the bookshelf. This is something that is the basis of how, for example, the advisory council can continue working and pushing within the institution to increase the possibilities for young people to participate in the democratic structures that we have set up for our systems. So I think what will be really cool to see when we meet in plenary again is what type of width that we can find in this. And the task for all the young participants here is to find actions that are directed towards multiple different stakeholders. It is ourselves as young people. What do we commit to? What is my pledge being here to continue on after this week? But it's also tasks to the governments, to the institutions of what we need them to propose further. And I think for me, the main thing that I really want to highlight here is something that was already discussed, is the issue of representation. So again, this is a panel of young women, but I can really relate to the reflections I would share already. Because if you don't see someone in a position of power, it's really difficult to relate to that and see that I can be that person too, I can connect with it. And I think it's the same thing for all young people. If we're looking at the decision-making structures that we have today, in the Swedish parliament, the average age is over 60. And when we're discussing, for example, voting, there are a lot of campaigns to get young people to go voting. There are not that many campaigns to get young people to stand for election. And these types of shifts is something that I think that we as young people are the only one who can see right now. So we have the glasses on to be able to identify where we lack the representation that we need to be able to make these changes happen. So that's my passion for this week. That's what I hope that we can get out as an action and to focus on. And then, of course, I mean, I really hope that we have some cool initiatives from the digitalization branch. I also have really high hopes for them. I understand there have been really good discussions, for example, speaking about human rights online, of surveillance, speaking of artificial intelligence and how they are shaped in ways that are more inclusive and make sure that we erase discriminatory patterns that are built in the systems where the power lays, basically. So yeah, I'm really happy and excited, and it's so cool to see this happen, since it was an advisory council initiative to have this campaign and that we're actually here now.
Brilliant, thanks for that. And I'm also tasked with timekeeping, and I would like to keep this discussion under 1 hour, with the understanding and the experience that attention spans are shorter these days. So it's a last question, and this question is for everyone. So I would just sort of go through each of the panelists. And the question is, what would be, if you had one request that would sort of be granted to you with respect to political participation, what would that be? So if you could ask for one thing right now that can happen with about young people's political participation, what would that be? And that would be my sort of parting question to everyone. Shall we start with Freya, maybe, and then go through?
Absolutely. Safety is a big one for me. There's so much to tackle, so much that's interconnected, and it's overwhelming. Young people need physical safety, mental and emotional safety and protections, because burnout is real. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and it can be really, really difficult and very lonely and an isolating thing. And that's what I said I find hope in, is the fact that we're doing it together. And I really want to highlight also safety of activists and other young people, especially marginalized people that are coming from groups that are often discriminated against, because when they go to protest or when they are active, they are the ones that are most likely to have their rights violated, their rights to assembly, their rights to free speech. Marginalized people like LGBTQ+ people are more likely to get attacked, especially trying to manage visibility and activism with your own safety is something that's very concerning. And not all of us come from countries where we might have those safety guarantees. And that's so important to remember, is the privilege that you have and how you can use that to help others. It's always important to consider the experiences of others. So maybe the experience of a man at a protest versus a woman, or the safety of an LGBT person at an event versus somebody else. So safety is absolutely essential, physical and emotional and mental, and having those support systems in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Freya. Who wants to go next? Liliia?
Yes, so as I come from Ukraine, and as we have really urgent problems right now in Ukraine, and our key concern is peace. So my main desire is to make democracy a fundamental truth that everyone should understand, because I think that democracy is basically at the core of peace and stability all over the world. And when I think of my experiences in school back in Ukraine, I do not remember that we have learned anything about democracy and why democracy matters. And only when I started studying political science, I learned more about democracy and why it is important for young people to be politically active and to protect democracy. And I'm very passionate about this democratic peace theory, which says, according to which democracies never fight other democracies. And I believe that in this way, if people, for example, even at the Council of Europe, we have a few member states that are far cry from being exemplary democracies. And in this way, I want to say that it is very important to share knowledge about democracies and to share knowledge why it is important and why it is important for peace. That is why I think that we should learn about that, and we should especially place a huge focus on learning that from a very young age, for example, in school. And so that is my biggest desire as a Ukrainian.
Thank you. Freya?
Thank you so much, Liliia. So I'll take from the Freya that important word. First of all, safety. Safety in our country for the people who are living in the villages, because our territory, 20% of our territory is occupied at this moment, and we have to also work on it. First of all, safety. The next goes to the severe economic, social, and political situation. What's next? What we are doing for the young generation? We want to help you. Just give the opportunities to us. This is the next question and next important thing what I can say. And the last, not but the least, what about our democracy development? What we can do in our country to develop this democracy in the young generation, in the previous old generation, for the future, what we have to do for our country. We have so many opportunities, like Georgia have so many opportunities, but we're not using it at all. For example, economical side, for example, agricultural side, for example, the young generation. We have so many informations like via the internet, we can read, we can use, we have so many opportunities. We love studying, we love education. You know, every Georgian young person is studying in the university. It's our passion to know something, to help the countries. It's in our blood, actually. It comes historically for us. So that's all what I can say. What's the next step? Thank you.
I'll just take the mic and fill in. I think the one thing for me is definitely recognition of new forms of participation. And I say this because young people are way more creative in the ways to work with advocacy than previous generations. I had a discussion last night with a young person who's here who said that he wanted to congratulate a newly elected chair for a council. And he realized that it's not a good idea to write an email or to even write on Facebook because they don't reply. So he decided to go on Instagram and find this person's private account and write there instead. And he succeeded and got a meeting with him. So I think young people just have this other forms of participating that I think will need to be recognized by institutions and governments to be able to really matter and to have their full potential blossom. So meet young people halfway is the thing that I want to ask institutions and governments who are participating here. And there are multiple good examples like citizen assemblies or the co-management system that we're working with in the advisory council. So very happy to tell any government representative here who's more interested in how we can find these forums for new forms of participation to develop further in Europe.
Yes, like the big question is why we should encourage youth political participation. And I can say based on our research that because it's efficient, we need to involve young people and we need to know their needs, and then we can create proper responses. Also because through this, they can develop and we can empower them. They can learn new skills, competencies, and then take our democracies further. And last but not least, also because it's their right, and therefore we should grant them this right to participate. And also this is why it's very important that tomorrow, in the framework of the Youth Action Week, we are going to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Council of Europe's youth sector and the co-management system. And as you can see, it can be done. In the Council of Europe, young people are involved in decision making since more than all of us young people are alive. So I really hope that other structures can learn from them.
Thank you, Marietta, for that closing statement. Indeed, the Council of Europe is not a young organization, but in many ways, it keeps itself young by actually involving young people in a meaningful way and trying to improve its own ways to ensure that youth can participate in its work. And so just as with social media and with everything else, the organization tries to keep up. And thanks to young people, it does, I think, better than many international organizations in this realm. So I want to thank you all for taking the time of your free afternoon to spend an hour of discussing youth political participation. And I hope to those of us who are listening online, this was a helpful discussion, and see you all later on, and looking forward to the outcomes of the Youth Action Week. Thank you very much.